Welcome back. Here's a question. What even is 2022?
Do you have the time to listen to me grind? Take down the film watchers and nerds all at once.
No, I actually mean it. Like, what is 2022 in terms of fantasy football and dynasty? Football, life, history. It's often talked about as moving in cycles or in circles or in squares or in some sort of... I don't think it is at all. But I do think we can learn from what's happened in the past to try and understand what's going to happen in the future, or what's going on right now, maybe even more importantly. And so when we look at running back scoring tanking again for another year in a row, we're at 4 straight years of below expected running back production, and it's not just injuries, although a few have affected it over the last 2 years. But it's kind of that. It's all merging together to create a certain situation in Dynasty that we described this off-season on this channel, and on the Dynasty Grind, and in my articles, and on my Patreon account, whether you believe it or not. So between 2001 and 6 years on from there, 2006, we saw top 12 running backs average about 19 points per game as a rough number. For the next 6 years, all the way to 2012, running backs in the top 12 averaged 17 points per game. So a 2 points per game difference between those two different 12-year samples. For 6 years after that, so 2012 onto... they average again 18 points a game, so it spikes back up a little bit. Now, a lot of individual trends going on in that, and you also have to remember players and people matter to history, so it's not like we didn't have great running backs in every year and a lot of different good football to watch with many different talented players of all levels. But in general, that's what happens. We cycle in about 10-year talent cycles, not just specifically at the running back sample. The arc of production, in terms of fantasy football at least, moves a lot more long-term than we tend to think even in Dynasty, where we tend to be overly reactionary to individual or single-season events. What does that mean? Right now in Dynasty, 3 of the best young players that are falling in value despite no real concrete sign that their talent or ability to quote volume for fantasy football to score points has in any way diminished from last year are actually Javonte Williams, DeAndre Swift, who's dropped a little bit but is still like top 5 in keep trade cut and stuff like that, and Najee Harris, who is still playing, but the story is he's playing through an injury, because I know the Dynasty answer to this is going to be sell for a first if you can get it, or you're forced to hold, because that's Dynasty theory at its finest, and it's worked throughout all these eras, and it's been developed and honed by those eras, so it should probably be the default. But I'm me, and I have to ask, really? Do we have to? Are these 3 young running backs definitely doomed when their talent still exists? So does their role. They're still young. They fit a lot of other Dynasty boxes. They're just not about the points right now. In Dynasty, we go for value, we go for picks, and we go for players. In fact, Dynasty can literally be described as trying to add value to your roster increasingly, whether you're winning or losing, instead of players that are acquiring points. Now, points matter, which is why we try and continue to bend that process round to getting us points as well as maintaining value. But Dynasty is about having more value on your roster than you had last week, last month, or last season. Will these players be drafted higher or lower this time in July and August? Does this happen? Has this happened a lot before? And so I went back and I looked at every player that had been drafted in the top 5 since 2014, when DLF ADPs begins. Alright, I found one example in all top 5 running backs, and there are really not that many because there's not that many stud players at any position since 2014. But of the 20 or so running backs drafted inside the top 5 since 2014, only 1 player had fallen out of the top 5 and moved back into it the next August, and that was Todd Gurley. That didn't work out so well for the rest of the years that followed. There are some other signs, especially when we move to the top 12, and if we actually just explore history a little bit, we know players like Jamal Charles suffered an injury in 2011, had a down season, and then came back and was Jamal Charles for a significant number of years after that. So it probably has happened before. In fact, I know for a fact it has, but is not the greatest sign for DeAndre Swift or Javonte Williams or Najee Harris, because all are on pace to drop out of the top 5. Now, a word on the players themselves. DeAndre Swift is still in top 5. I would guess he is going to be drafted in July and August as a top 5 running back still. He should come back this season. He should play some more games, reclaim his role, put up points, and remind us all that he's a young, good player with talent, and his role is still his, and Jamal Williams is just very good, and he's in the best situation to maintain that ADP. I don't know, obviously, I'm not prophetic, but I expect at least one rookie running back, and I know zip, nada, nothing about the rookie class except the general hype and conversation, and occasionally you'll see someone who plays Devy talking about how tall that guy is, or whatever they say about tape clips, I don't know. And I think there's at least one rookie running back in the top 5 in Dynasty ADP, like Saquon Barkley was, by August. You've got Saquon Barkley, who's still only 25, and is going to be the running back 1 this year, so he's probably in the top 5. I would imagine DeAndre Swift keeps his ADP. Who else? Jonathan Taylor. I hadn't even gotten to Jonathan Taylor yet, and we're already at 4. So there's one spot left. Christian McCaffrey? I still like Christian McCaffrey in the top 5. I'm expecting other people to panic on his age, because he's like, what, 2004 now? But maybe not. Because the second question we have to ask isn't just, will they be drafted higher, but also, what's going to happen to the running back position? And it sucks. We don't like it. We want our money back, please. Well, DLF ADP does contain some answers to that, and that top 5 running backs do maintain ADP inside the top 2 rounds, but it falls from the first round to the late second round. So the next question you should honestly ask yourself, this is all well and good, but it's what are your league mates gonna do? Go look what they did with Cam Akers. He's a recent example who's disappointing this season. What did they do when Cam Akers got hurt? What did they do when Cam Akers came back for that playoff game and was healthy again? And that brings us back to our 3 maybe buys? My league mates won't be doing it, and here's the reason. Between now and next season, that July-August ADP I was focusing on, we have, well, 3 months of history. Najee Harris could improve, but probably not. Swift could come back, but he was kind of struggling even to start the season. Jamal Williams was co-opting some value, and does he come back fully healthy? And then we've got an off-season where any news can hit, lots of player movements can happen, new coaches can sign, players are going to get traded, and the NFL draft happens. It's not that talent doesn't matter, or that it doesn't exist, or that running backs don't matter, as the phrase used to be. That's why Addison Hayes from the DLF channel is saying, sell Javonte Williams for a first, because it's good dynasty theory. If you can get a first, that is much more sure value than a running back in this situation. Doesn't mean it can't work out. I think 2017 is going to bring with it, based knowing nothing about the rookie class, several young running backs who are really going to supplant a lot of our guys inside the top 12 in terms of production and in terms of ADP. We're going to see a fall of those young running backs as well, and now is not a good time to buy any of those running backs who start falling in value, except maybe DeAndre Swift, because he's probably going to change minds this season again, so depends on the trade, but Swift is the most interesting. Instead, I think July. I think just before the NFL draft, just after the NFL draft, when all this has happened, and I think a lot of it's going to be negative, especially for Najee Harris, and probably for Javonte Williams, because there's not much he can do apart from get healthy, start training, and let those reports leak out, for him to really, not that he's trying, he doesn't care, but for Dynasty ADP to really react to in a positive way. Why is it a bad Dynasty year? If you want to win, the best players to go target right now are old. And if you want to lose, you can't trade for 2023 picks without giving insanely high levels of value. Dynasty theory takes you home. Don't buy these injured running backs, yet, at least. It is what it is. Anyway, what have you been thinking about this week? Let me know. Let me know if the topical takes for these weekly videos are still working. Last week it seemed to work pretty well. People liked it. Our comments felt pretty good. So I'm just keeping it up with this week. Not so much individual takes on players. I mean, you can read my one big epic thread every week on Patreon, or any of my Dynasty articles, or most of my tweets actually, to find out what I think about individual players, or just hit me up. And so I thought, yeah, topical. But I hope you're having a good week. Thanks very much. I'll talk to you again next Saturday. This will drop on Saturday. Next Saturday. Hey, thanks for checking out another video. If you could like, subscribe, comment, that'd all be great. But also check out the rest of the channels and follow my Patreon link to see what I'm up to over there. And the Linktree link, I guess, is going to take you to easy access to my podcast, the articles I'm writing over there at DLF, as well as most of the other things I'm up to. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks very much.